Right guys, on to some tactics. I've been asked a couple of times by someone about doing a video on worm fishing. Now it's definitely coming to its own at the moment. Not the cheapest way of fishing at times, because you do need, worms aren't cheap sadly. Good bag of dendrobinas, but you don't always have to put a lot in. So it does definitely come into its own, as I always do with these things. When would we fish worms? Now, it's two times when worms become really good. When it's really hot and they're not really having it and they're not responding to noise, they don't want to know really. Worms are really good then, and when they've been spawning, which ties in with the heat. We've had both recently, so and I know it's coming hot again. And that's looking out the window, it's chucking it down with rain at the moment, but it is coming up again soon. So it's definitely a good method at the moment. Again, it's just lots of stuff they like to eat in it when they've been spawning. It's like the eggs. It's a lot of natural protein. Bruce, no. Sorry, the dog is here with me because I'm on nights. He is very vocal, as you'll have noticed in other videos, so I apologise if he goes again. So yeah, that's when we would be fishing it. Everywhere has little spells though, it'll work for a while and then it will go off and then want something else, so just bear in mind what the results are. But keep an eye on results for Facebook and stuff everywhere. Wherever you fish these days, there's always some results to look at and learn a bit from them. It's a good tip with all sorts of fishing. But on to fishing worms. There's a few different, first of all, depends what we're fishing for. I'll go on to F1s first. Fishing worms for F1s, you're going to be doing it on the mud line, or just fishing a worm on the hook underneath. Whenever I fish cast shallow, I'd always set a rig up. Like, you want a decent thickness bristle. I like a wire one because you're not fishing it through the water, you drop it down, just a Balkan one dropper, standard F1 gear. When you're throwing casters, where it's building up over the day, like you're feeding heavy, it's not all getting eaten. And the same for carp, like where I go with rookery, as I said, I caught on it the other day, caught on it in Lindholm as well. This fish to catch underneath, like they're eating the casters that are accumulating on the bottom. Don't fish a small bit of worm, it wants to be a standout. A lot of fisheries, there's lots of little fish. You want to be catching either F1's carp, big skimmers, barbel, like the decent fish. So you want a decent, I'd have nearly a full dendron. We'll come always with any, we'll cover it now, we'll come through the head, get a good hook hold on it, and then I'd just, like a whole worm, I'd just nip the end off, just for an extra attraction, slow the worm down a little bit as well. That would be under that, not feeding worms particularly on that, but it's one time when we've used worms just as the hook bait. Again, just as a hook bait down the edge, just double worms. I want a big wide gape hook for that, a 12 or whatever. Great hook bait for the worms down the edge. Make sure when you put two on, when you fish down the edge or anything, give them a good slap on the water before you ship out. You'll see people that do fish with worms, you might not realise what they're doing, but they'll hook them and before they put their top kit on, give them a couple of big slaps. You want to stun them so they're long and just sit there dead. If they're rigged around, they'll cover the hook. That's covered just fishing worms on the. Now actually feeding worms, like I say, for F1s and carp, but it's more F1s, like it's going to be in shallow water on the mud or in the edge, so it's the standard mudline rigs, like just now I'm with the DS, it's just a 0.4 mud, 3-inch hook length, big bulk number 8s, just a heavy float to sit there. We've covered it on the mudline fishing already. So if you haven't watched it, just go back to that. It's a good time to go and watch it again because the mud is going to come really good now. Now they've spawned, they're going to be in that shallow water feeding. Now for hook bait wise, for doing that, you don't, like for F1s, we want a decent piece of worm, but not a full huge great worm. yeah, what, inch long piece, inch and a half piece. Feed for that, there is a few ways of doing it, but for me the best way, because you can sort of change how you're putting it in, you can ball it up and keep it down quick, cup it in loose, is making a sort of a worm slop. Now you're always going to start with your worms, like a good, you don't need that many worms, it's like a good handful. Most of the venues fish for F1s, you don't have to riddle the soil off. If you do riddle it off, and you can't do what I'm going to tell you. But yeah, just put them in. Always put them in a big bucket. I've got some triple scissors. I've had them literally. They're the only bit of kit I've got from when I was a kid. I made them when we fished the World Championships out in Italy. We were feeding lots of chopped worm. We all went to the supermarket in Italy. Bought 3 big pairs of kitchen scissors and taped them together, and I've still got them 20 years on, still going strong. But put your worms in your bucket. So you've got a big area and you can spread them all out so you can see how big you're chopping them. Because the size, and for F1s you want small bits, so it's mush it, chop it right up. Then to that we're going to add just some pure riddled soil, the sort of same amount. If you imagine like your worms, you've got a pint of bait pots, a pint of worm, a pint of soil, or 2 pints of soil even, a pint of micros and a pint of casters. And then probably a pint of water as well. If you've got any flavour in, I like the F1 liquid, the spotted fin, a good squirt of that as well. And it wants to be sloppy, like a paste, just so it holds together in a ball. And we're just going to cut that in and just build the peg up, just feed in that. So you can ball it up a little bit so it comes out with a plop if you need to draw some fish in. And it's just steady, you just build your peg up through the day. Obviously the micros, they all like fish meal, so you're adding a bit of that in with it. You could use ground bait, but I prefer the micros. You've got the cloud from doing that soil anyway. You can also use that for fishing shallow for F1s, can be great. Just needs it slightly firmer, just fishing a little piece of worm on your shallow in and throwing balls of that makes a big cloud with the soil. And again, it gives you something to fish on the deck with later on. I remember when they had the Drennan knockout, when they used to do the Drennan knockout, I had the first round that was at Tunnel. Didn't draw particularly great and really struggled, couldn't catch shallow. And then I've had, the last day I've caught one a bone underneath it with worms, big F1s, had 70 pounds and got through to the next round. So don't give up, just because you ain't catching shallow, there's fish on the bottom of it. That is F1s sorted with it. I'd say it's all the standard rigs in all honesty. Now, chopped worm for carp, again, big pot in worms and casters, we do it at Decoy, it's really good. You do have to riddle the soil off at Decoy, which is a bit of an annoyance, but it doesn't matter too much because we feed it in a different way. But down the edge, normal edge rigs, 2 big worms. For doing it out in the water, and like, it works better on the venues where there's not so many silvers, like Oak Lake at one of the strips, that's the one where worms are really good. I caught on it in the festival last year. And it's just big cupping them. Same again, big handful of worms, chop them up, but we want like half and thirds of worms. We want big sections of worms. Carp have got big mouths, you want to be putting the other fish off. So big pieces of worm lying on the bottom. And I bulk this out completely differently. I don't put micros in with it because I don't want them going to a slop. Like Decoy, you're not allowed to feed slop. So I put two pints of 4 mils. I just use 4 mil catalyst where they're allowed because I love the catalyst flavour. A couple of pints of hemp, 2 tins of corn, and then a big dollop of casters in. Just cover it with water and put some of the catalyst liquid in again. So it's like, they call it all different things. They call it, my mate Russ, I always think what he calls it, the guano mix. I know Des Ship calls it that as well. I don't know where that's come from, but the guano mix, that's what we'll call it for the day. Now I use it in 2 different ways. So I'll talk through Oak because it's the place that it really springs to mind where I do a lot of it. So I would have caught a rookery on it the other day as well. like oak when it's not fishing well in the summer. I say not fishing well, you're still fishing the big fish, so you might still be fishing with 200 pound, but when you're not getting lots of bites, there's two ways of doing it. It'd be the same rig for both, no messing around rig wise. You do find that you do catch some great big things for worms. I fish like the 18 to 20, the red slick, 020 to 018 hook length, a big size 12 hook like MXC2, or in all fairness, because I'm pulling a bit, I like an even stronger hook, Matrix. It's the one hook I don't use at Matrix's, just a Guru XS, Super XS spade. Like, it's got a really wide gate and they're really strong, really strong. It's just a better gate for getting two worms in, because you're going to be having a big stand up, two worms over it. Again, give them a slap before you go out. Rig wise, just a bulk and a couple of droppers, 6-inch hook length, and I'd lay 4 inches on the bottom. Because you're fishing in silt, and what you'll find is if you fish dead depth, they're going to come along and they'll be eating out the silt, and it'll actually get a couple. You can fluctuate the depth by 1 inch or 2. So it's worth plumbing up again, but if you've got it dead depth, then worms are going to start sinking your float and you get frustrated. And just lay a little bit on and it's just nice and stable. Float wise, this is a big one, this is a 1.5 grams, just because it's what I've got in here, I'm not going outside in the rain. These are a carp deck from DS Floats, glass stem, really strong, 2.2 bristle, and you want to be leaving a lot of bristle shown for this, because you're going to get a lot of liners where they come foraging about. You want to read it. If it's going like this and going sideways, if it was just shot it down to there, any movement will pull it under and you're going to foul up and leave a lot of bristle showing, and just wait for those really quick bites. Just sitting there and holding it. And now the two ways of doing it, first of all, like long, where say 13 metres on the strips, you're allowed 14.5, it puts you nearly in the middle of the lake. Just kindering, large kinder, and just building the peg up, just trying to catch one fish at a time. That's the way of going about it, like long. Now the short line, like where we'd throw meat or something if you were allowed, and then days when they're not going for baiting, going through the water. How I fish that, I wouldn't do it for the first couple of hours because I know I'm not going to catch there really on these harder days, these still hot days. Just kindering a bit, it's the same rig there, it's the same depth all the way out. Like on the top 5, sort of halfway through, I would put 2 full big cups of that mix in, drop them in, and then just watch for fizzing, and every 20 minutes I would put another big cup in. It sounds like putting a lot of worm and stuff in, but because it's all bulked out with the hemp and the corn and everything, it's not that expensive in all honesty. It sounds more expensive than it is. I'm only putting like 1/4 kilo worms in probably, which is, some days you can need more, like 8 quid, a couple of quid of pellets, bit of hemp and corn. It's not hugely expensive. Just dump on it in, and you will there, and I'm sure it's the same everywhere, you'll start to, it'll erupt once the fish do start going into it, because they're now feeding fish later in the day. And you simply, you go out over it, and you'll find you'll catch 2 or 3, and then the bubbles are starting. You put another big cup in, and it gets really good. And I've put some really big weights there. Won a lot of matches doing that. Some days it doesn't go, and in which case we're doing no wrong. It might go only the last half hour. Just keep kindering long, and just trying to catch one at a time. That is the best way I can describe worm fishing. Again, mud line for cartoning the edge, you're just using the normal sort of heavy rigs. It's a positive method. It is, I think that's all I can say with it. There's not too much to it, it's quite simple really. Like everything I ever show you, it's just about getting the basics right. That's the most important bit. For carp fishing with it, leaving plenty of float bits and showing. Just remember to plumb up again. I'd have a tub of water on your side tray just to wash your hands, because you'll find your poles covered by the end of the day. Just get your hands, and always have a towel on my side tray anyway, so just dip them and wash them. Just save messing up all your gear. Proper gear, you, like I say, you catch the biggest carp on it. it's something when they do feed, they love worms, but just be mindful of the seasons, because it could be great 1 week or for 3 or 4 weeks, and then they'll just get fed up of it and they'll move on to something else. And then the problem with worms is if they're not taking it, it's terrible. It's releasing all the amino acids out the chopped worm and that into the water, and they hate and they don't like it. So just be mindful. Don't go gung-ho if you know it's not going to work. But there are, like, it would have worked the last couple of weeks, and we'll have a month during the summer where it'll be the bait where you just can't beat it. So yeah, nice tackle. Like I say, for F1s it is just like fishing any other bait. Just get that slot, the right formula. Really simple. You just got to get it so it just binds. You don't want it so it's solid as a rock, and you don't want it so it doesn't bind at all. So that's that covered. If there's anything, there probably is something I've missed with it. Might be something really simple. Just drop me a message underneath the video, and I'll get the questions answered for you. And then please give me some suggestions for what you want next. I know someone did ask about mugging. I will get a video done on that. I want to do 1 video a week. I don't want to flood it and then have nothing to put on there for a few weeks. So 1 video a week. Mugging is something to definitely cover. I haven't done paste yet. I know someone asked about paste, but just get your suggestions in. I'll try and do what's most relevant to how everyone is fishing. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next week. Cheers.